My name is Alana. I'm 32 years old, a single mother, and until 6 months ago, I believed my mother was the most respected woman in our town. Everyone loved Gloria Bennett. At church, they called her Saint Gloria. At charity galas, she smiled beside politicians and business owners. She organized food drives, donated winter coats, and somehow always ended up in the local newspaper looking flawless. Welcome back to Shadow Family Stories. But my 5-year-old daughter Ava changed everything with one sentence whispered into my ear at bedtime. I froze beside her princess blanket. "What basement?" I asked carefully. Ava hugged her stuffed rabbit tighter. "The secret room." At first, I laughed nervously. My mother didn't even have a basement, or at least I thought she didn't. Her old Victorian house had been renovated years ago. "Ava, what secret room?" Her tiny face turned pale. "Grandma said bad things happen if I tell." The room suddenly felt cold. I sat there long after Ava fell asleep, staring into darkness while my stomach twisted. My mother babysat Ava every Thursday evening while I worked late shifts at the dental office. I trusted her completely. But now my daughter was scared. And children don't invent fear like that. The next morning, I drove to my mother's house pretending everything was normal. She greeted me in her silk robe with a bright smile. "Sweetheart, coffee?" I studied her carefully. Perfect makeup. Perfect hair. Perfect everything. Too perfect. "Ava mentioned a basement," I said casually. For one split second, my mother's smile disappeared. Then it returned. "Oh, goodness," she laughed. "She means the wine cellar." "You never mentioned a wine cellar." "It's unfinished and dusty. Nothing exciting." Her eyes shifted away from mine. That's when I knew she was lying. My mother never looked away when speaking. I decided not to push further. Instead, I waited. That Thursday, after dropping Ava off, I parked 3 houses away and watched. At 7:42 p.m., a black SUV pulled into my mother's driveway. A man stepped out carrying 2 large duffel bags. My chest tightened. 10 minutes later, another car arrived. Then another. Nobody knocked. They all entered through the side gate, not the front door. I grabbed my phone and walked closer through the dark neighborhood, my pulse hammering. Music drifted faintly from behind the house. Voices. Men laughing. Then I heard something metallic slam shut underground. Underground. My mother did have a basement. I crouched near the fence and peered through a gap. The side garden had changed. A metal cellar door was hidden beneath artificial grass, and 2 men were carrying the duffel bags down into it. I nearly stopped breathing. Suddenly my phone buzzed loudly in my hand. Mom calling. The cellar door snapped open. Every head turned toward the fence. Her expression was nothing like the smiling woman everyone adored. It was cold. Dangerously cold. She stared directly toward where I was hiding. Slowly, she smiled. Then she said 4 words that made my blood run ice cold. "I know you're there." My heart slammed against my ribs as I crouched behind the fence, clutching my buzzing phone. My mother stood in the backyard under the yellow porch light, her silk robe swaying slightly in the night breeze. "I know you're there," she repeated calmly. For one terrifying second, I considered running. Instead, I stepped out slowly. Mom's expression softened instantly, almost like she'd flipped a switch. "Alana? What on earth are you doing hiding in bushes?" I forced a laugh. "I could ask you the same thing." The men near the cellar door froze. One of them zipped up a duffel bag quickly. Mom moved between me and the cellar entrance with practiced ease. "Private charity inventory," she said smoothly. "Winter donations." At 9 o'clock at night? Her smile tightened. Successful people work late. I looked toward the hidden cellar. Ava said there was a secret room. Mom's eyes darkened for a fraction of a second. She has an imagination. "Mommy?" I rushed toward her immediately. "We're going home." Mom grabbed my arm before I could leave. Hard. Too hard. "Don't overreact," she whispered sharply. "You're embarrassing yourself." For the first time in my life, I saw fear behind her eyes. Not guilt. Fear. And that terrified me more than anything. That night, after Ava fell asleep, I searched online property records for my mother's house. At 1:13 a.m., I found the original blueprints. There was no wine cellar. There was a storage bunker built beneath the property during renovations 8 years earlier. No permits had ever been filed afterward. The next morning, I called my younger brother Nathan. "You're being paranoid," he sighed. "Mom runs 3 charities. Of course people come and go. She's hiding something. You always think Mom's controlling because she helped us survive after Dad died." I almost argued until he added something strange. "Just leave it alone, Alana." His voice sounded nervous, like he already knew something. That afternoon, Ava sat quietly at the kitchen table coloring while I watched her carefully. "Finally," she whispered, "Grandma said if people tell secrets, they disappear." The crayon slipped from my fingers. "What people?" Ava shook her head quickly. "I'm not supposed to say." I knelt beside her gently. "Sweetheart, nobody can hurt you. Not Grandma. Not anyone." Tears filled her eyes. A cold wave swept through my body. "People cry there. Not wine. Not donations. People." But this time, I came prepared. Camera. Flashlight. And enough courage to finally learn who Gloria Bennett really was. At 10:06 p.m., the black SUV returned. At 10:11 p.m., the hidden cellar door opened. And at 10:14 p.m., I saw 2 men dragging another woman inside. I almost screamed when I saw them dragging the woman underground. She looked disoriented, stumbling in heels, her blonde hair covering half her face. One of the men gripped her elbow tightly while the other carried another duffel bag. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my camera. I snapped photos anyway. The cellar door slammed shut behind them. For several seconds, I sat frozen inside my car parked across the street, trying to convince myself I hadn't seen what I thought I saw. But deep down, I knew. Something horrifying was happening beneath my mother's house. I drove home in silence, checking my rearview mirror every few seconds. By the time I reached my apartment, my stomach was in knots. The next morning, I took the photos to my best friend, Marissa, who worked as a reporter for the local paper. The moment she saw the images, her face changed. "Alana, these men? You recognize them?" Marissa zoomed in on one of the faces. "This guy works private security for Councilman Everett." "The city councilman?" She nodded slowly. "And Gloria Bennett donates heavily to his campaigns." My blood ran cold. This was bigger than I thought. Much bigger. That afternoon, my mother called. "Family dinner tonight," she said sweetly. 7 sharp. "I'm busy. Bring Ava." Then her voice dropped lower. "You don't want to disappoint me right now." The call ended. I sat there trembling. For the first time in my life, my mother sounded dangerous. At 7 o'clock, I reluctantly arrived at her mansion with Ava beside me. Nathan was already there looking tense, and Councilman Everett himself sat at the dining table drinking wine like he belonged there. Mom smiled brightly. "There's my girls." Nobody mentioned the cellar. Nobody mentioned the men. But throughout dinner, I caught Everett staring at me constantly, like he was studying whether I knew too much. Then Ava accidentally dropped her spoon. Mom leaned down to help her pick it up and whispered something into her ear. Ava immediately went pale. I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly. "What did you say to her?" Mom blinked innocently. "Excuse me." "Ava, come here." My daughter rushed toward me instantly. "Too calm. Just checking on you," he said. His eyes drifted toward the opened letter sitting on the kitchen counter. Then he asked quietly, "Did Gloria contact you recently?" A chill swept through me. How did he know? I forced myself to smile. No. He studied me for several uncomfortable seconds. Then Ava walked into the room holding her crayons. The moment she saw Moreno, she froze. Her little face turned pale. "That's the man from Grandma's room." The room went silent. Kids imagine things. But Ava clung tightly to my leg, trembling. Every instinct inside me screamed danger. Moreno crouched to Ava's level with a gentle smile. "You probably saw someone who looked like me." Ava shook her head violently. "The silver ring." My blood turned to ice. Moreno slowly stood back up. And for the first time, I noticed it. A silver ring on his right hand. Exactly like the drawing. Our eyes locked. Neither of us spoke. Then his phone rang loudly, breaking the tension. He glanced at the screen briefly before silencing it. "You should be careful what your daughter says publicly," he said calmly. Not protectively. Like a warning. After he left, I locked every door immediately. Then I called Marissa. 20 minutes later, she burst into my apartment carrying files and her laptop. "You're not going to believe this," she said breathlessly. She pulled up Detective Moreno's background. Half his employment history was sealed. 3 major trafficking investigations connected to him had mysteriously collapsed over the years. Missing evidence. Dead witnesses. Disappearing suspects. My chest tightened harder with every word. "He's not investigating the network," Marissa whispered. "He's protecting it." At midnight, my apartment building suddenly lost power. Every light went black. Ava screamed from her bedroom. I grabbed a flashlight and ran toward her. Then I heard footsteps outside the apartment door. Slow. Deliberate. Someone was there. The doorknob began turning gently. Once. Twice. Then a soft voice came through the darkness. "Alana, open the door." "Detective Moreno." Marissa immediately called Federal Internal Affairs while I shoved furniture against the apartment door. Moreno kept speaking calmly from the hallway. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Ava cried in my arms while the doorknob rattled again. Then suddenly, silence. We waited almost 10 full minutes before hearing elevator doors downstairs. He was gone. Or so we thought. The next morning, Marissa discovered her office had been broken into. Every file connected to Gloria Bennett's case was gone. Except one. A flash drive taped beneath her desk. Inside were encrypted video recordings from the basement. And one final recording labeled, "If anything happens to me." We opened it immediately. "If you're watching this," he said shakily, "Moreno runs everything now." Mom answered to him after Everett failed. The politicians were only clients. Nathan continued. "There's a private fundraiser tomorrow night at the Grand Mercer Hotel. Moreno will be there with investors and city officials. He keeps records on a secure server hidden in the hotel penthouse. This is our chance." That night, while the city's elite gathered beneath chandeliers and champagne towers, Marissa secretly connected Nathan's flash drive to the hotel's media system. At exactly 9:17 p.m., every screen inside the ballroom flickered. Music stopped. Guests looked upward in confusion. Then Nathan's video filled the giant projector screens. Moreno's face drained of color instantly. The ballroom erupted in chaos as hidden footage from the basement appeared publicly for everyone to see. Cash exchanges. Politicians entering the cellar. And finally, Detective Isaac Moreno standing beside Gloria Bennett. The crowd gasped in horror. Reporters began recording immediately. Some guests tried fleeing. Federal agents stormed the ballroom within minutes. Moreno attempted to escape through the kitchen corridors, but agents tackled him near the loading dock. As they dragged him away in handcuffs, he locked eyes with me one final time. "You think this ends anything?" he shouted. But nobody listened anymore. Because for the second time, No social media. No contact with neighbors. No returning to my apartment. They drove us 3 hours north to a quiet lakeside town where nobody knew our names. For the first time in months, things felt still. Too still. One rainy afternoon, Special Agent Lena Torres arrived carrying a thick file. She looked exhausted. "There's something you need to see," she said quietly. Inside the file were photographs from Marino's storage unit. Some taken outside my workplace. Some outside Ava's school. One taken through our apartment window while Ava slept. My stomach turned violently. "He was watching us for months," I whispered. Torres nodded grimly. "Probably longer." Then she slid one final photograph across the table. It showed my mother. Not in prison. Outside. Standing beside a black SUV only 3 weeks earlier. I stared at the picture in disbelief. "That's impossible." "Officially," Torres said carefully, "Gloria Bennett never left prison." Fear crept slowly through my chest. "Then how was this taken?" Torres leaned closer. "We think someone inside the prison system helped move her temporarily." My pulse hammered. My mother still had connections powerful enough to move freely. Even after sentencing. Ava wandered into the kitchen at that exact moment holding her crayons. She stopped cold when she saw the photograph. Then she whispered something horrifying. "Grandma came to my school." Every muscle in my body locked. "What?" Ava pointed at the photo with shaking fingers. She watched me at recess. Agent Torres looked alarmed. "When?" "Before we came here." I nearly stopped breathing. My mother had been near my daughter after her conviction. Nobody had protected us. Nobody even knew. That night, after Ava finally fell asleep, I sat alone on the cabin porch while rain poured over the lake. And for the first time since the trial began, I realized Gloria Bennett might never stop hunting us. The next morning, Agent Torres returned before sunrise. "There's been another development," she said immediately. Her expression told me it was bad. Very bad. Moreno had agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentencing. But only under one condition. He wanted to speak to me personally. "No," I said instantly. Torres sighed. "He claims he has information about your mother." That changed everything. 3 hours later, I sat inside a secure interrogation room staring at Detective Isaac Moreno through thick glass. He looked calm despite the prison uniform. Almost amused. "You look tired, Alana," he said softly. "Get to the point." Moreno folded his hands carefully. "Your mother isn't the mastermind." "I already know that." "No," he replied. "You know about the network. You don't know who built it." He slid a small cassette tape across the table. "Vintage. Old. There's a recording on that tape," he continued. "Made 22 years ago." I frowned. "What does that have to do with me?" Moreno smiled slightly. "Everything." Back at the cabin, Agent Torres played the tape using an old recorder. Static crackled through the speakers. Then voices emerged. One belonged to my mother. The other belonged to a man. A powerful man. A terrified younger Gloria Bennett spoke first. "You promised nobody would get hurt." The man answered calmly. "You needed money. I needed loyalty." My heart pounded harder. Then the man said something that shattered my entire world. "Your husband should never have threatened to expose us." I stopped breathing. "My father." The tape continued. A car door slammed. Mom crying. Then silence. 20 seconds later came the sound of a violent crash. Tires screaming. Metal crushing. Agent Torres slowly turned off the tape. The room felt ice cold. My father hadn't died in an accident. He'd been murdered. And my mother had helped cover it up. I stood beside my father's grave for the first time in nearly 6 years. Rain soaked through my black coat while Ava held my hand silently. Everything I believed about his death had been a lie. Drunk driving. That's what Mom always told us. A tragic accident after a late business dinner. But now I knew the truth. Dad tried exposing the trafficking network, and they killed him for it. Worse, my mother helped bury the truth beside him. Agent Torres approached quietly holding another folder. We traced the voice from the tape, she said carefully. Who was it? She hesitated, then handed me a photograph. The moment I saw the man's face, my knees nearly gave out. Senator Richard Vane. One of the most powerful political figures in the country. A man constantly appearing on television talking about family values and public safety. A man currently preparing a presidential campaign. He founded the network decades ago, Torres explained. Moreno worked for him. Your mother worked for him. Everett answered to him. My hands trembled uncontrollably. This wasn't local corruption anymore. It reached the highest levels of power. Suddenly Ava squeezed my hand tightly. Mommy. I looked down. She pointed toward the cemetery entrance. A black SUV sat parked beside the gate, watching us. The same kind that used to arrive at my mother's house. Agent Torres immediately reached for her weapon. But before anyone could move, the SUV slowly drove away, leaving only one message carved into the mud near my father's grave. A symbol. The silver ring crest. And beneath it, for chilling words. We are still watching.